Hey, this is Kevin Kelly, and you are listening to the Stardom Cast.
Hello guys, and welcome to this special bonus episode of the Stardom Cast. I'm your host, Rob Goodin. I'm joined as ever by Mr. Matt Turner and the most awesome of Kongs, awesome Kong herself. How are you?
I'm well, you guys. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. We were just saying that you're on the road at the moment, so the fact that you're able to do this for us and manage to fit us in is honestly fantastic. I can't thank you enough. Now, Matt, you wanted to thank someone else as well.
Yes, awesome, Kong. First of all, thank you for doing the show, and hello to everyone in the Stardom Cast universe. Awesome, Kong. I just want to kind of put over our mutual friend that helped set this up.
Joey Image.
Joey Image. If there is, in the definition of the word good brother, Joey Image is an absolute good brother. Now, I've known Joey about 20 years, so I was just wondering, one, how did you meet Joey Image? And two, let's start this podcast off with a good Joey Image story. But before you do, I do want to let you know what I'm going to say, Rob, that we try to keep a clean podcast, and we both know Joey has a very silver tongue. So I'm just curious, like I said, one, how did you meet Joey? And two, let's start the podcast off with a really good Joey Image story.
Okay, we met at a show on the Northeast. Which promotion, I'm not exactly sure. But we met at a show in the Northeast over a decade ago. And we just kept in touch over social media. This is when Twitter was new. That's how far we go back. And he had posted like he was going to retire. And so I gave him a call and like cut a promo on him and insisted that he not leave the business. And he didn't leave the business. He stayed on for a few more years. And we just became really good friends after that. Now, as far as a good story, well, there was this one time I did a show in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And this is when there was a really bad storm. It was after Sandy, but this was a really bad storm where they said that we were going to be like snowed in or stormed in for days. And so I was stuck at the hotel. And Joey braved the weather to come and bring me. I was sick, and he braved the weather to come and bring me like orange juice and soup and whatnot and water, because I didn't know if I was going to have water for days and whatnot. And he made sure that I was taken care of. And the room that they got me was like this really nice suite. And so it had two rooms. It had a really big living room and a separate private bedroom and like two baths. And so I insisted that Joey stay and like hang out, and he slept in the living room. And I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and the air conditioner was automatically on. I guess the hotel just like had it on, and it was like freezing cold. I could have sworn I saw like a penguin in the corner of the room, and poor Joey is on the couch with like no blankets, and he's like asleep, but he's shivering. And I felt so bad for him because I'm in this plush bedroom in the back with like a comforter and whatnot. So I took the comforter off of my bed and I tucked Mr. Joey Image in.
I'm totally texting him when we get off this podcast.
What a guy. What a guy.
Yeah, he's a good, he is the definition of a good brother. I'll tell this story, and I actually, when we first, when Joey first got in touch with you, and then you agreed to do the podcast, I mentioned this story on the podcast, but I'm going to mention it again, and I just want to mention it to you, because this is the way that Joey is. So this is about 12 or 13 years ago, give or take, we're wrestling in Connecticut, and the show just happened to be in a church. Again, you know Joey, we love Joey, but he's got that silver tongue mouth. So we're all sitting there kind of hanging around the locker room. We're kind of bringing up, like, Joey Image is on this show. It's in a church. Like, is he going to be on his best behavior? And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. He, like swearing is his second language. He doesn't even know that he's doing it. And Kong, I swear to you, I'm literally sitting in the locker room. The door opens up. He looks at me and he goes, Matt Turner, how the F are you? Obviously, he didn't say F, he said the whole word. The door behind him didn't even shut. And we all just started looking. He just popped us without even knowing. Like, he swore before the door even shut, wrestling in a church. And that's Joey Image in a nutshell. I mean, I have a zillion stories about him. He's just people that knows people. I'll just bump into him at New York Comic-Con. Like, New York Comic-Con before, like, the pandemic would always sell out within, like, 2 or 3 hours. And, like, we would, like, really hustle to try to get passes. Me, my tag partner, Andy Header, my brother-in-law, and my sister, we would always try to get the passes. And one of us would luck out and, be able to score 4 passes. Where Joey would show up, like, 2 or 3 days before the con, and he'd be like, yeah, I got a 4-day pass. I'm like, how? Like, literally how? Like, we're planning out, like, strategies, like, we're getting ready to, like, take over a small island to get these passes. And he just, like, contacts somebody, and he's able to get a 4-day pass, VIP, the whole 9. But, yeah, Joey Image is the definition of a good brother.
Yeah, he sounds a good guy. I wish that I knew him, and maybe when I come to Philly for WrestleMania, I'll meet the elusive Joey Image. Maybe
he'll probably be backstage somewhere.
Yeah, probably being tucked in by Kong. But Kong, I can't wait to dig into your wrestling history, because the more research I've done, the more I've realized your opponent list just reads like a who's who of wrestling royalty. Like, it got to a point where I spent 15 minutes just on Cage Match typing in names to see if you'd wrestled them, and like 95% of them you've either been in a ring with or shared a ring with. Like, obviously I know that you're now retired, and hopefully you are enjoying your retirement, but you must look back on this career and think, I did pretty damn well.
I feel fulfilled in my career. I feel that I contributed to women's wrestling and changed the face of it to where women aren't just a popcorn match and are taken seriously, and who's debuting as far as the next generation of women. And I would say, like, it's almost like that game 6 Degrees Kevin Bacon. You get serious from a wrestler, and within like 3 matches, tie me to him for sure. That should be a drinking game. 6 Degrees.
It got to a point, Kong, where I started just typing in random names. Like, I typed in Jaguar Yokota, thinking there's absolutely no way Awesome Kong has either wrestled Jaguar Yokota or been in a ring with Jaguar Yokota. And there's like 4 matches came up. I was like, is there anybody she hasn't wrestled? I mean, you obviously became the biggest face in history when you eliminated Michael Cole from the Royal Rumble, but the fact that you have wrestled all these people is just incredible. And I'm really glad you brought up sort of changing the face of women's wrestling and sort of making them not the popcorn match, because we've actually got a question, and I was going to leave it a little bit till we were talking about your run in TNA. But this comes courtesy of our friend over on Discord, Jose Lara. And he's actually written, this is my question. How did you feel when you and Gail Kim became the first women to main event TNA Impact, and also the second in American wrestling behind Trish Stratus and Lita in 2004 on Raw? And I know that obviously you're a huge Lita fan, sorry. Unless I'm very much mistaken, wasn't Lita a huge influence on you from the get-go?
Oh, yes, she was, because she displayed all the athleticism and seriousness that was needed to, like, begin a spark and influence and generate that want to get in the ring and do what she did. Trish was also a really big influence on me too, because if you remember when she started, she broke in pretty hard. In the world, I have so much respect for her because, in the beginning, they wrote a lot of storylines that were wrapped around her looks and beauty. And through her persistence, she garnered so much respect by displaying actual ability in the ring. And you can see her transition and her improvement over, her arc of improvement was just incredible. And that was a huge inspiration. I was a Lita fan, big Lita fan. However, watching Trish's transition of being really green in the ring to being a ring captain was, a ring general, was extremely inspirational. I'm like, if she started where she started and she's now where she is, I can do that too. So although I was a big Lita fan, big Lita fan, I would say Trish Stratus had even a bigger influence to actually make me put on boots and give it a try.
Me and my friends used to refer to Trish, especially when she's getting towards her prime, as Trish Kawada, because the ferocity she would kick you with, it was like, man, like she can go toe to toe with Kawada and Budokan. But that just really goes to show, Kong, that if you really put your heart and your mind and desire into something, no matter where you start, the journey will take you wherever you want to go.
Exactly. She refused to be put in a box. And she broke the mold. She really burst through that glass ceiling, and I love her for that. Those three women, Trish, Lita, China. I wouldn't be here without their performance, without their contributions.
Yeah. China was fantastic. I remember seeing China for the first time. I think I was only 8 at the time, and I remember seeing her and just thinking, wow, she's so imposing and so different to what I expected. And obviously Trish, you mentioned the progression. She was, by the time she retired in 2006, she was completely different, completely unrecognizable to the way she was when she debuted. Was any of this going through your mind? So, as I mentioned, Trish and Lita main evented Raw, first women to main event Raw. And then there's you and Gail Kim, who, when we said on social media and Patreon and things that we were interviewing you, so many people came forward and said, oh, awesome Kong's feud with Gail Kim. Like, it's one of those seminal moments of wrestling for me. It was one of those things that I remember from wrestling. Did any of that go through your mind, the fact that I'm doing the same as Lita and Trish?
Well, not that exact comparison. Like, we were doing the same as Lita and Trish. For Gail and I, we felt like we were embarking on something new, and really visceral. I don't want to say raw because that's a different.
Choice of words.
Nice pun.
But it was really the core of it. It was something different, and every time we met in the ring, we really, people talk about living the gimmick. We would live the gimmick when we stepped into the ring. She was Gail Kim, this super baby face, and I was Awesome Kong, this monster that wanted to do the most damage and create the most carnage that I could, and we lived it. We were those people when we stepped into the ring, and I think that's what people saw, and it shone through that these women, they believe they own hype right now.
Absolutely.
That's the idea.
But I mean, that was the dream. That's the dream, to go in there and be someone else, and to get paid for that, to get paid to step in the ring and be someone else. It was real for us. It was the most real, authentic thing that I've ever experienced. People that don't really watch wrestling or don't know about it always use that 4-letter F word that we do not like. But that wasn't a thing for us. We stepped in the ring and we wanted to eviscerate each other in the most professional manner.
Of course, always in the most professional manner. I mean, for me personally, with TNA, and we'll probably come back to TNA because there's some things I desperately want to know, including a story that you told on Inside the Ropes, the tour with Kenny McIntosh, which I absolutely love, and I replayed about 4 times when it came up on YouTube. But the one thing I just want to sort of say about TNA in that period, it was built on 2 pillars for me: the X division and the Knockouts division, because at that time the TNA Impact Knockouts were doing things that the WWE basically were steering away from completely. So what you were doing was incredible. The stuff that you were doing with Gail was incredible, to the point where even now, however many years into the future, it's still, for me, one of the best feuds in TNA history, without a shadow of a doubt. And you mentioned being real and visceral. It's certainly one of the most real and visceral feuds, and I think you did a fantastic job, both you and Gail, with that. And I'm sure we're going to return to the topic of TNA in a bit, but I just want to take you back, if that's okay, all the way back to the start, where you end up in All Japan Women's in 2002. Now, this, unless I'm very much mistaken, was where you made your debut. How did this come about? How did you end up over in Japan wrestling the likes of Aja Kong and, Manami Toyota later on, Jaguar Yokota? How did this end up happening?
Well, a lot of things went right at the right time. It started with, I'm gonna take you way back in time. It started with my brother-in-law wanting to be on Tough Enough, an MTV reality show where you had an opportunity to win a WWE contract. And because I was a professional at the time, a social worker, and had my own office, he asked me to download and print out the application. And when I did, I printed out one for myself and submitted the requirements, which was like a video and a little blurb about yourself. And I got called up to come try out in Vegas. And it was a long, 3 days. They hoarded us into this room in Caesar's Palace. They did this speech, and half of the people were indie workers, which I didn't know anything about. I thought in wrestling, WWE or WWF at the time was that was it. You wrestled, that's where you went. But so I had a lot to learn. They gave us the rundown of what to expect in the show. You're going to go into the ring. It's a no bump ring. and I didn't know what that meant. What is a no bump? I don't know what that
Boxing ring.
you know. And you're gonna do your promo, and then they're gonna speak to you, and you get out. And there was about 400 or 500 people trying out, so it took like 3 days. You had 3 minutes in the ring. It took like 3 days to get through everybody, and they gave us numbers, and I was actually in line right next to Kenny King, and for those 3 days, Kenny gave me the insight of like the indie wrestling scene, so I got to learn what a bump was and whatnot. And so when it was my turn to go up, I go in and I do my promo, and I'm so proud of myself with my two-tone purple hair, and I do the kip up that they asked to do, kind of, sorta, and and then I was done, and I'm so proud of myself. And then JR's like, okay, thanks, next. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, ask me questions. You asked all these other people questions, ask me questions. And JR's like, no, thank you, you can go. And I'm like, no, I'm not leaving. I just drove my beat up Kia through the mountains from LA to Las Vegas. My mama with me. She's got, you don't know the pressure my mother puts on me. I'm not leaving this ring till you guys ask me some questions. Then took off work and everything. No, we talking. And the fact that basically I cut a promo on JR really excited Bob Holly, and so Bob's like, let's ask her some questions. And then JR just like ripped into me and was like, why do you think you deserve to be at to get this an opportunity to get this contract? You are too big and too overweight to ever make it in wrestling. You would never make it here, darling. And that put a fire under my butt to say, no one says that to me. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, watch this. And so when I went home all dejected and poor because I gambled all my money away that weekend.
When in Vegas.
Vegas, right? I contacted some friends because I grew up in the entertainment business. My mother was, a producer, an actress, and a contestant coordinator for Family Feud. So I was always plugged into the entertainment business. And I called a few friends, and a friend of mine said, well, there's a show that is casting. It's called Discovery Health Body Challenge. And what that show was basically like The Biggest Loser, but it took place way before The Biggest Loser was even a thing. And the producers there knew I wanted to be a wrestler, so they casted me. And evidently, they thought I was too heavy to even be on their show, but they liked my personality. And I'm like, I'm too big to be on a weight loss show? Come on now. And so they cast me, and they sent me out. They wanted me to realize my goal to be a professional wrestler, and they sent me out to the School of Hard Knocks to train with Jesse Hernandez. That's where I took my first bump out at the Empire Wrestling Federation School of Hard Knocks in San Bernardino. Got to give a shout out. And but then they also knew that I was a big China fan because one of the producers saw her book in my apartment. I had read her book. And so they organized a segment where they did a surprise visit with China, and she was training at the New Japan Dojo in Santa Monica. And so with that, the New Japan team said I could come over and train anytime I want. And so I plugged in and got in with, all the Inokis over there at New Japan. A few weeks later, they called and say, hey, Kia, there is a promoter for All Japan Women here looking for talent. You should come in and try out. And I said, well, okay. And it was two of us. It was Shelly Martinez, who also trained at School of Hard Knocks, and she had been wrestling for a few years. And then there was me, who had just taken her first bump 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And all I knew how to do was run the ropes and throw a clothesline and take a bump, because I knew what a bump was now. And that's all I knew. However, that worked in my favor because they actually wanted someone that they could teach and mold in their ways and not have to break any habits that they didn't like, you know. And plus, I was this big, imposing urban black woman that, you know, is walking around. Japan is basically like, you know, Godzilla walking around. And so they booked me, and it was fortunate at the time because Aja Kong had just left the company. They had a big public breakup, but there was a big show coming up in Kawasaki, and so on the card it was A Kong versus Hoda Yumiko. And so by naming me Amazing Kong, which was unbeknownst to me, I did not know that that's what I would be called, because my first wrestling name was Vixen. You know, the show got me to lose all this weight, so I was going to come in with my black patent leather cat suit and my hair down to my butt with, you know, my shiny boots and, you know, my sex appeal and whatnot. And that's, you know, every wrestler has an ideal in their head of what gimmick they want to do when they first get into wrestling. And that was mine. I'm going to come in and beguile you with my sex appeal and then scratch you in your everywhere, you know. But I go from Vixen to coming to the New Japan Dojo one day, and a rookie Shinsuke Nakamura is training there, and as soon as I walk in, he points at me and says, Amazing Kong, which I thought was the most racist thing to say. And I said, you know, I know you're foreign, but you can't come to America and point at black women and call them Kong. That's not what we do here. And so, let me just say, Shinsuke Nakamura is one of the sweetest persons in the world. And so after we understood that there was a misunderstanding, he brought out the Japanese wrestling magazine and pointed to the section. There was an article where they had a press conference and said they found a girl. Her name is Amazing Kong, and she'll be, you know, at the show in Kawasaki. And so now I finally understood that, oh, okay, evidently I have this new name. I've gone from Vixen, this woman with great sex appeal, to this monster heel. Well, that's a big 180, but okay. And then 2 weeks later, I find myself in Japan, main eventing a big show at Kawasaki, which was then.
And it's so bizarre that, first of all, how much your gimmick pivoted, which, you know, from, as you've just said, this vixen, this person who relies on her sex appeal and then, you know, scratching, as you put it, to just this monster destroyer. And you've gone from taking your first bump to main eventing a show in Kawasaki. That's absolutely incredible, the journey you've taken in such a short time.
Like a fever dream.
Like, yeah,
really.
absolutely.
Yeah, like a fever dream.
Like a fever dream. And it actually answers one of my questions. One of my friends, Garth, who will kill me if I don't mention him on this podcast, he's a huge Awesome Kong fan. Huge. And he actually asked the question, what or who inspired you to create the Awesome Kong character? The fact that you had no say in this whatsoever, and it's what you've lived ever since, is that as weird as it sounds?
Well, you know, wrestling in itself, basically, when you decide to become a wrestler, you've basically decided to, you know, up and join the circus.
Yeah, fair. Absolutely fair. Yes, I hadn't thought about it that way. But am I right in thinking that Hotta, the person that you had your debut match with, isn't she a legitimate MMA fighter?
Yeah, she is. However, all the girls that train in Japan are skilled in mixed martial arts. There were a few times where we participated in actual mixed martial arts bouts. You know, we had to be weighed, measured, and matched up with people of our weight class and skill. And in fact, there was one show, it was a big show, it was an all women show, and there were 6 professional wrestlers there that had matches that day. I was one of them, and I was the only professional wrestler to win her bout.
Wow. That's quite impressive. Like, I cannot believe how much you are doing, considering you are a relative rookie in the business, and they really did sort of throw you in the deep end. It was really a case of sink or swim, wasn't it?
Oh, it really, really was. But the fact that, like I said, I grew up in the entertainment field. I've been a child actor since, I could walk and talk. When I got to Japan, I didn't know really how to wrestle, but I knew how to act like I could.
Figure it out as you go, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So, obviously, we move on. You're still part of All Japan Women's, and I want to go into a couple of specific people in a moment. But obviously, you joined All Japan right at sort of the tail end of their their run, and I know that things had gotten quite bad for the company with one thing and another. What was it like backstage? What was sort of the atmosphere like? Was there a sense that, yeah, this is going to come to an end soon, or was it a case of sort of, oh, we're on the up and up, and then it just sort of ending?
Well, everyone on the roster worked as hard as they could to make sure everything could go as long as it could, until the very end. There was a sense of foreboding, like even in a foreign language, I could tell, like, something's up. But the girls showed up to work every day and gave it 110%. As things just started to chip away, the owners of the company, the Matsunagas, in the beginning of All Japan Women's, it was like this big national phenomenon. And, they had this big building, 5 stories with, the dorms on top, the restaurant, middle office, and then the dojo on the bottom. So it was like this wrestling mecca, that it was a wrestling haven. I absolutely loved it. And it was really sad when towards the end, they lost that building, which was basically like a historic building almost. It really was enmeshed in the cultural fabric of Japan. And to see it torn down, and they literally tore down Paradise and put up a parking lot. Literally, it's a parking lot now. Where that building was is a pay per hour parking lot, and that was the saddest thing I had ever experienced. I mean, kind of kick ass that Jody Mitchell knows her shit, but it was sad to see. And the company went on for another 2 years, and we clawed our way into existence and worked with other companies, but in the end, everyone went their separate ways, and the library, I think, was sold off, and it was done.
It's such a sad way for such an amazing company, pardon the pun, obviously, but, such a brilliant company that had such fantastic shows and fantastic matches and was responsible for some of the best women's wrestlers of all time, for the company to go out in the way it did. I mean, I knew that the building had been reclaimed by creditors, but I got no idea they actually physically tore it down to put up a parking lot. That's absolutely crazy. I just can't believe that. Obviously, Aja Kong. You've already mentioned her. You were sort of the A Kong to replace A Kong. Obviously, she comes back, and you have fights with her. You win the tag belts with her. You're basically intrinsically linked when it comes to All Japan. What's she like as a person? What was your sort of relationship like with her, both in the ring and outside the ring? And basically, what was your experience of Aja? And how hard is it? Well, how hard does her back fist actually hit? I feel like that's an important question that a lot of people want to hear.
Me too, Rob. Great question, brother.
Well, one, Aja Kong is a woman of superior class. I have to say that.
Okay.
When I met her for the very first time, I ran into her at a steakhouse, B&M Steakhouse, and I was having dinner with a friend, another wrestling friend of mine who went by the name Tsunami, and she walks in, she's like, there's Aja Kong over there, and here I am, this rookie that has been named, basically they just like stole her name and gave it to me. And all I really knew about her at that point is that she had a big breakup with the company. And I didn't know if like she was upset that they had named me Kong or what. I'm like, are we going to be fighting in the steakhouse? I don't know.
Film it.
So Tsunami says, the thing to do, we need to go over and say hello and give our respects. And so we went over and I introduced myself and said hello. And she was really nice and polite. And, we bowed and backed up and left and went to our table. And because she was there before us, when she left, she said goodbye. We got up, we bowed again, and she left. And 20 minutes later, we learned she had paid for our meal.
Oh, wow.
Talk about class, right?
Absolutely. Here I was thinking, we're going to get the steakhouse brawl between the Kongs. And
right? Like, seriously, I'm sitting there like, do I just go and like scratch her in her everywhere? Do a little bit of vixen? Like, what do I do?
Bring out the vixen.
Now she was extremely delightful and had paid for our meal. Shut me right up. I'm like, well, okay, now. I mean, that's just class right there. And the next time we met, I believe it was at a show. Again, she was magnanimous and just lovely. And pretty soon we were working together. Now, as far as her back fist, I will say this. The first time, and this is I am not exaggerating here at all. We're in the match, and it's time for the backfist, and she gives it to me. And I never thought that this was an actual thing, but this is an actual thing. The closest I can describe it is that she knocked me into third grade.
Wow. Because
I literally said, but I don't want to use the blue pencil. Now, the public school used to give us these big fat blue pencils. And that was the only thing that came to mind was the big fat blue pencils from the third grade.
And folks out there, that's why us wrestlers do not like it when you use the 4-letter word, that F word, and we don't mean the one that rhymes with duck either. You do not say that to pro wrestlers because there's nothing F about it. And right there's the proof is in the pudding.
But what's awesome about it is that she is so dead on with it that while it is extremely snug, she makes sure that she strikes you in a place that will not cause cranial damage, if you understand what I mean.
It's hard to say places, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. She hits, I mean, like Robin Hood has nothing on her. She hits on every time in the proper place. But yeah, you feel it. Your teeth will rattle. but it's just nerve endings. It's nerve endings.
It's go on, Matt. After you. Go on.
I'm sorry, buddy. We mentioned earlier before about Naomi Toyota. She's, I mean, if anybody does their homework, she's not only one of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time, but one of the greatest wrestlers, period, of all time. What was she like in the ring, backstage, and just as a person as well?
Extremely lovely. All the women in Japan, lovely. They, their thing was, we make, if I make you look good and you make me look good, we make money together. I didn't experience any egos of people, in wrestling, we always say, trying to get their shit in. It was all about the camaraderie and making sure we had the best show ever. And as far as Toyota's concerned, I mean, I witnessed her. She had an anniversary show one time, and she wrestled in every single match. And I don't mean like these 5-minute puff matches, even though there was one match that was like nice, short, and comical and fun. No, there was 6 matches on the card, and she went hard in every single one of them. It was a physical feat that absolutely wowed me. And she wasn't no spring chicken at the time, and she went hard. And she basically stayed. And she came out at the beginning of the show, and she basically stayed in that ring until the end. If you can catch it, I highly recommend that you watch it, because just the physical prowess of this woman was a feat in itself. Like, Guinness World Records should figure out something. With that day. And I'll also add on a personal note that the woman can bake like a demon. The pastry and baked goods she would provide were out of this world. So.
We get all the great scoops on the Stardom Cast,
absolutely.
Don't we, Rob?
Joey Image is being tucked in by Amazing Kong. We almost had a steakhouse brawl, and Manamo Toyota, the best to cook. So I want to pivot away from All Japan in a moment, but obviously you became tag champs, the last tag champs, I believe, with Aja Kong, and you became the top champion in the company when I believe you beat Hamada, and then I think you lost it to Hamada as well. But how did it come across to you that you were going to be winning the biggest championship in this company just over 2 years after you debuted?
It felt like, well, at that point, 2 years in, I finally understood where I was and what I was doing and the contribution I was making to wrestling, and just how blessed I was to be a part of that scene. So when that came about, it felt like an enormous responsibility to be worthy of that belt and be the type of, not just heel, but the type of champion that the fans respected and loved to hate.
I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, obviously, All Japan went under, but one person that I do know that you wrestled, Nanai Takahashi. Obviously, she's still currently active in Stardom and doing very well, considering she's been going as long as she has. What's she like to wrestle? And this is like a really daft question. She's very, very screamy now, and I don't remember her being as screamy in All Japan. Has that always been a thing that you know of, or is this just the latest in Nene Takahashi's life?
Oh, Nana would always scream and shout and whatnot. And I mean, she would scream so much you find yourself screaming. It just was, that kind of way. Oh gosh, she's a consummate professional. I mean, when I got there were times, like I said, when I got there, that was my second match ever for my career. And as I went on, because of the language barrier, after a match, I'd ask, how was it and whatnot. And a lot of the times the girls were just really nice about it. Nana was not. And when I say she was not, I mean she was not in the best possible way. She did not blow smoke up my ass.
I see, right.
She sat me down and she would get out a dictionary and she would make sure that we communicated and went over everything that didn't go as planned and everything that could be better and everything that was good as well. And it was through her criticisms that I finally began to progress as a wrestler. Because when you come back and even though your match is crap and everybody's like, yay, you're like, yay. And it wasn't until she sat down on and bring out, and I knew when that dictionary came out, okay.
Time to go to school.
When we leave here, they're going to be still sweeping up the building. It's going to be me and the janitor. But it was, I feel so blessed and so fortunate that she wanted me to be the best I could be. She wanted to build me up to be the best heel to face so that she actually faced somebody who was worth defeating,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so she's the one who accelerated my ability in the ring. God bless her for that. And it through her professionalism of wanting me to succeed and get better and taking the time to give me constructive criticism, I've always taken that lesson and passed it on. A lot of people in entertainment want to be people pleasers and they want people to like them. But if you're really someone's friend and if you really want them to succeed, you have to say the hard things too. And if they are wise and if they are worthy, they will hear it and they will apply your wisdom towards their routine.
That's a really nice story, actually. Like, we've obviously never seen that sort of side of Nanae Takahashi. At the moment in Stardom, she's sort of doing this thing where she's having matches with the rookies and literally dragging them up to her level. So it seems like it's something she's been doing for years and years and years, and that's quite an endearing quality, really.
Paying it forward. That's basically what it is, paying it forward to just make the business, better. That's it's a great quality that she has, obviously.
Final question about All Japan before we move on to something altogether different, which I can't wait to talk to you about. Who were your favourite and least favourite opponents when it came to All Japan? And, you can throw Gay Japan and LLPW and all the other promotions you wrestled for in Japan. Who stuck out as your favourite opponent that whenever you stepped in a ring with them, it was going to be magic? And who were the ones, if any, that you stepped in the ring, looked across and went, I am in for a rough night?
Oh gosh, Sophie's choice, right? I would say whenever I would step into the ring with Maikawa Kumiko, that was always going to be a great time. She was my wrestling mother, and she always took care of me. It drove her crazy that my socks never matched, but she always looked out for me. She always took care of me. So whenever we were in the ring, I would try that much harder to make sure that she was pleased with the match. Now, as far as like excitement and like, ooh, this is gonna be a good match, one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen in my life is Momo Nakanishi. And she was one of the first story arcs that I had after Hoda. And She was my first, I think, cage match. And they had sent, before I got to Japan, they had sent me home with like DVDs to watch, the girls work and understand what I was getting myself into. And my whole family, my nieces and nephews, they were really young at the time, gathered around the TV to watch, these DVDs. And my nieces and nephews fell in love with Momo because she was so dynamic and just magic in the ring. And when I called and told them, hey, I'm going to be fighting Momo, they're like, oh, Kiki, you can't beat Momo Nakanishi. She's the best. But she really was. She was 4'0" but strong as a whip and speedy and precise. And she wowed me the first time we had a cage match. And we're in there, we're fighting, and we're going toe-to-toe. And then she ran up the cage like a spider monkey. And it was so quick and so fast that, one, I just had to stand there with my mouth open like, did I just see what I just saw? And they just, did they put like a crane or some kind of on her to like lift her up out of the cage? Because that was, she like defied gravity and like ran up like a spider monkey. And like, I'm supposed to be performing and fighting, and I'm standing there like an idiot going, wow, that was cool. Wow, that was cool. Oh yeah, I'm performing right now. Okay, let's go. She had that presence in the ring where she could wrestle a broom, and it was one of the best matches ever. I mean, but her and Nanae would tag, and they were one of the best tag teams I ever saw. Because Nanae herself can wrestle. Well, actually, literally, Nanae and myself, we had a match against Kara Kurobi once. Literally a plush dog, Kara Kurobi. And
right.
we wrestled that dog and put that dog. That dog was a star by the end. I mean, that dog whipped us around and bumped us here and there and gave us all kinds of false finishes, and it was absolutely it's scary, believable, but to tell you the truth, but it was fun and amazing. But if you can wrestle a plush doll and actually suspend your belief for half a second and buy into that, then you're a hell of a wrestler. And Nanae and Momo Nakanishi had those capabilities.
Sorry, I thought you'd finished.
Enjoying someone in the ring. There was this one wrestling girl. They called them athresses, and that was an athlete and an actress mixed all in one.
Right.
And there was one chick, I can't remember her name, but her nickname was the Egoist. Hello, that gives you a clue.
Right.
I'm brand new to this business. I think it was like barely my 4th month in, and she took some liberties. And next thing I know, I'm in an actual fight in the middle of a match, and I'm very confused because the language barrier and the fact that, it was like that Rocky scene where it was like, hey, this ain't what we talking about. What's the name?
Thunder Lips.
Yeah, it was like, this ain't what we discussed. Thunder Lips, it was like Rocky and Thunder Lips from Rocky 3. And it got bizarre for a minute, but in the end, we garnered our professionalism and finished as professionals. But after that, it was a very chilly relationship, I have to say. But evidently, she had that kind of relationship with a lot of people, which is unusual in Japanese women's wrestling because, like I said, the camaraderie there is so strong and everyone's extremely unselfish. So, but whenever we'd have, share a locker room, it was like the kind of relationship where she would say, "Oh, Kia-chan, you're so cute, such a fat face, so nice, like fat baby." And it's like, okay, you throwing shade, bitch, but okay, it's cool. It's cool, but I'll be like, "Oh, whatever her name was, egoist, you so thin, no, like, finished food,
Right back. That's awesome. You followed it right back.
Yeah.
It is bizarre that you do. Well, I suppose it does take all sorts. So, All Japan, you are Awesome Kong. You are a monster. You team with Aja Kong, another monster. Talk to me a little bit how you two monsters of wrestling.
Oh, wait. You're about to ask me about Hustle, aren't you?
I am about to ask you about Hustle.
You're about to ask how us two monsters were wrestling in tutus? Yeah.
I am going to ask, how did we get from Awesome Kong and Aja Kong to Margaret and Erica? How did this happen?
Well, I mean, Hustle was a very, very, very different promotion, an acquired taste, and I would say more like a satire and commentary on wrestling. Well, first of all, they didn't call it wrestling; they called it a fighting opera.
Oh wow! Okay.
And it really was a scale. It really wasn't like an operatic scale. The production value was extremely high, and as well as the paydays and stuff, and it was just a different kind of product. So, what better way to have this contrast and shock people than to have the two biggest monster heels be these cute, girly baby faces in tutus.
Legitimately, the first time I saw, and this is all, the question comes from at Plastic Afro, who just basically wants to know about what your experience what your experience was like when you were there, and sort of how did your character come about. I remember for the first time seeing an image of yourself and Aja Kong as Margaret and Erica in those tutus, and it took me a good 20 minutes to realise it wasn't photoshopped. I thought it was a fake photo for the longest time, and then obviously I'd read a little bit about Hustle. But how did you go in with this idea? Did Aja Kong go in with this idea, or was this all the Hustle creative team?
It was written by the producers of Hustle.
Right.
They have, like I said, the production value was extremely high, and so they have these sketches of what the character and costume was going to look like, and a very general idea of what the characters were. And basically for us, it was just like, your characters are a 180 of what you usually do. And I'm like, okay. And so I kind of based my Margaret off of, I was a big fan growing up of a show called Animaniacs.
Oh my!
Yes.
I haven't heard about that show in years.
Yeah, I love that show. And so there was a character on there. Gosh, I can't remember her name, but she was a little girl, and she had Elmira, and she had like a pet, and she would like hug it together, and the pet was always trying to get away from her. And,
Yes.
like, love you and squeeze you and love you, and and so that was basically Margaret. She's lovable, but she's stronger than she understands, and when she's hugging you, she's not trying to bear hug you. She's just trying to, give you some love, but it ends up that you tap out or go to sleep. then oops.
Honestly, I could have done 1,000 interviews with you, and I would not have expected an Animaniacs reference. Honestly, I still see that. It's them that do the country song where they go through every single country. And
Yes.
my brother used to be able to do that. We used to watch it that much, but yeah. I'm really intrigued by the whole Hustle promotion just because of how different it was to like Gaia and All Japan and things like that. Matt, have you got any questions regarding Kong in Japan before we move slightly more towards America?
No, sir. You hit the two things I want to talk about was with Aja Kong and Toyota. So you, as always, sir, you hit them right on the head. So, but thank you very much.
So obviously you moved to TNA, where you became the biggest thing in the company. I'm just going to say it from certainly from my standpoint, anyway. But how was, and this sort of piggybacks onto a question that Joseph Usher has put on our Patreon. What were the main differences between wrestling in Japan and wrestling in America, and sort of was it tougher with the Japanese female psychology, and were they? I suppose you've answered this in a way with Nanae Takahashi with being strict if you missed a spot, etc. Were there big differences between sort of TNA and the likes of All Japan Women's and Gaia Japan and LLPW?
Well, I mean, with TNA, I would say no, because when I started in TNA, we were starting this knockouts thing where I got to bring what I learned in Japan into TNA, into what we were creating. So what we were creating was different from just American indie work, and different from Japanese matches. It was a hybrid of sorts, something new, something different, something with the TNA brand stank on it as well. You know, because TNA has its own style. I'm sure you would agree. So you mix, Japanese style and the American style, and the things that Gail learned at WWE, and the things that the other women learned traveling abroad, like Mexico and whatnot. And this was a new, different thing that we were creating. So with TNA, not that big of a difference. But when I came from Japan to America, I had only been working on the indies a few months before I went to TNA, and there was a huge contrast as to how I would work in Japan and what is usual in the States. One of my first matches in the States, it was like, we didn't have, the promoters at that time didn't give women that much time. So by the time our match was finished in Japan, we were just getting started. What are you talking about? And in America, I noticed that in the beginning, there's a lot of, sometimes I call it tiddlywinks. And
Right.
It took me a minute to learn that in America, you might have a little bit of tiddlywinks in the beginning. It took me a while to stop saying, when are we going to just fight? Shit, lock up. I want to hit you. It took me a while to learn the slower paced, work smarter, not harder style of American wrestling versus the hard hitting pace of Japanese, hit them 1,000 times and they get up like Jason Voorhees type wrestling. So it took a while to understand and get in the groove.
I think it's fair to say you found that groove. Obviously, as we've already discussed with your fantastic feud with Gail Kim. What would you say So looking at your entirety of your run in TNA, there have got to be some standout matches, I'm sure. What were your favourite matches from your entire run in TNA?
Okay, I'm gonna throw like in not any particular order.
That's
okay?
fine.
Sure.
So there is, of course, we went overseas once, well, a few times, but the one time we went overseas, and there was a match between myself and the Dudleys against Booker, Charmel, and Scott Steiner. And during the match, Mick Foley comes out and we do a bit, and we got to kiss, and it was awesome.
That's such a wild lineup of wrestlers. That.
Right? It was insane. It was so much fun. So there was that. Then there was a match with Gail. A bunch of matches with Gail, but there's one that stood out where I came out, and right beforehand, I always talk about how we were living the gimmick. It was real to us. We were Kong and Gail, and before the match, I felt like I wasn't Kong, and like Kong hadn't shown up that day, and like I was like, Kong's not here, and Jeff Jarrett's like looking at me like, okay, you're crazy, 'cause you're standing right in front of me, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. She's not here.
You couldn't find the persona. Sure, yeah.
But then my music hit, and I went out, and we got going. I remember the first spot was me going after Gail, and then I went over the ropes, and then after I went over the ropes, Kong really was there, and we just went in, and it was so much fun. And I think it might have been the match that I went through a wall under the stage.
I remember this match. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. That's kind of one of the matches that people started calling their grandmas and stuff to be like, watch the knockouts and things really fired up from there. Then there was also a match. One of my absolute favorite matches was a match that never aired.
Okay.
And it was with Cheerleader Melissa, and she was Alyssa Flash.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out there and we had this, when I say this, amazing match. And it wasn't even it never even aired. It was like this, just, we need a match today. You guys go out and work. And so we went out and worked. And we get backstage, and people are like clapping, and I didn't know what they were clapping about, so I just started clapping like an idiot, like, and they're like, they clapping for you, they like your match, and I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. But it really was a great match. So I'm so sad that it never aired. But Melissa and I are like best friends in wrestling. So when we got in there, we were like, let's get in there. Yeah. I'm gonna hurt you too. I love you. What you want to eat later and whatnot. And then there was a tag match between myself. Hamada was finally at the company, and then Chantel Taylor Wilde, and there's another person in the match. But that match right there was like the beginning of the tag division for TNA. And that match was stupendous. It was so great because we got to do like kind of a bunch of flying spots and house dives and stuff that we hadn't really done before. And Hamada being such a great talent, Chantel Taylor Wilde being such a great talent. It was just a lot of fun. So yeah, those pop up in my mind. And then any house show where I was in the ring with Nikki Rox, who was Roxy Laveau.
Roxy
Any house
Laveau.
show with Nikki was just my absolute favorite. She was my absolute favorite person to work in all America, outside of Gail.
Wow. Honestly, I can't. The only thing I remember about Roxy Laveau is her feud with, obviously, who was it? I think it might have been Angelina Love during lockdown 2007. I think that's my only real memory of it. So I'll have to look more at some of the matches. Why was the Cheerleader Melissa match never aired? Just did you know it wasn't going to be aired prior, or was it just a case of we're cutting it for time?
Yeah, it was. It might have been set to air overseas, maybe.
Right.
I don't even think the cameras were on when we were out there doing that match.
No film in the cameras.
They needed a match to go on because it was a live show, and so Melissa and I went out there and did a match. And I mean, when I say it was one of the best women's matches of that year, and I'm not one really to put myself over like that, but it really, really was a good match, and it's such a shame that it never aired. We had so much fun, and we did so many things that the audience, the fans at home, really would have enjoyed.
Yeah, it's a shame that we never got to see that. There's so many people who speak highly of Cheerleader Melissa. She had a stint in Stardom as well, and people speak really, really highly of. Obviously, we had Alison Danger on a couple of weeks ago, and she speaks highly of Cheerleader Melissa as well. So, Alison Danger, friend of the show, who you've also shared the ring with, because it was something else I checked on Cage Match. But yeah, I've got to ask, in terms of TNA, Victory Road 2009, the whole Jenna Maraska match, how did this happen? I mean, to be fair, I knew nothing about it, and then I saw it literally a couple of weeks ago, and I could be completely wrong. I could be completely misreading the situation, but you looked like you'd rather be anywhere else than in the vicinity of that match. Did I misread that, or was that absolutely the case?
I can neither confirm nor deny. Such happenings from that long ago. I'm in a profession where I get hit in the head a lot, so I cannot recall those events.
I do not remember that match. Sir, good sir.
Outstanding answer. So obviously, hugely decorated in TNA. You were then in WWE briefly. You did make it. You were able to show JR exactly what you were able to do, which was fantastic. See, I am here, relevant of what you said. Ha ha. And then, sort of went back to Impact, Independence, and then ended up in AEW. Sort of what are your main memories of sort of that era? Because people, like, when you mention Awesome Kong, you think about the fantastic stuff in TNA, the fantastic stuff in Japan, both sides of your stint in WWE. What were the differences between, like, Impact and WWE? Obviously, they're both American styles, but what were the major differences you found?
I don't think I can really give an informed answer on that, because I had left WWE still like in my honeymoon phase, so I didn't really get to look or experience a lot to have an informed opinion.
Yeah.
I do know that I felt like at TNA, because we had started something, and the backstage that whole locker room, I felt was the greatest locker room on the face of the earth. One big family, everyone looking out for one another, because we were building something together. I love that about TNA. It was still, I have yet to find a locker room, even the locker room that I respect so much in Japan, as special as the locker room I shared during that time at TNA. Just between the men, the women, everyone just took care of one another. We were one big family. Now, being new at WWE, you always hear stories, so you come in very apprehensive, and a good wrestling coach, if you learn from the best, then your wrestling coach would have told you at least once, when you walk in somewhere for the first time, close your mouth and open your ears. And so that's what I did when I got to WWE. However, I didn't think I wasn't there long enough to really have a well-rounded assessment of the inner workings of the company.
No, fair enough. Again, you still have one of my favourite moments ever in Royal Rumble history, eliminating Michael Cole. Still, even now, one of my favourite moments. So obviously, you returned to TNA, you returned to Japan, and then you were part of AEW as well. The very sort of fledgling years of AEW, and how did that come about? How did you get? Obviously, you were on the first Double or Nothing show as a surprise entrant with Aja Kong. Everything seems to come back to Aja Kong. But how sort of did that come about? And talk a little bit about your run in AEW, and what was it like backstage? Obviously, you've been hugely complimentary of the TNA locker room. How did that compare to AEW?
Well, a lot of the same people at AEW are a lot of the same people that were at TNA. And since I was a part of AEW since its inception, that also felt like I was at a place where I was contributing to building something. But between AEW and Glow, get to stay or have the influence I really wanted to before departing and before COVID. Door for AEW is not shut. So you never know. I may be there in some capacity someday, because they too are family members. It's a really close knit family over there.
We get the Kong Shida match, Rob.
There we go. That's what we want.
Kong Shida match. Yeah. Hell yeah.
If you can get that done, Awesome Kong, we'd be over the moon. So, just a couple more things, and then we'll let you go and get on with your drive, I promise. So, obviously, you've retired now. Do you keep up with wrestling? Do you keep up with wrestling in Japan? Do you keep up with wrestling in the US? If you are, what are you watching? If not, where's the future lie? What are you looking to do?
No, I'll be honest. No, I do not keep up with wrestling, because when wrestling, with wrestling, if you're a worker, if you're a wrestler, if you're watching it, you want to do it.
Right, absolutely, yeah. It's like trying to be on a diet, Rob. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not going to drink soda ever again, and then you go to the greatest soda bar ever.
Yeah,
come on, it's a tease. Yeah.
So I'm on wrestling hiatus for right now.
Right. Okay.
Just for right now, but that doesn't mean I don't, peek in on who's making noise and whatnot every now and again. But the day-to-day, the rundown, no. But gist. I get the gist.
Yeah. Honestly, to have you on here and speaking, I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing your stories, especially about, you know, the great times in All Japan and your time in TNA. And just thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the podcast and talk to us and answer our questions and things like that. We honestly, and especially as you're driving. So again, thank you so much, Awesome Kong. We massively appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. And guys, that pretty much rounds off our bonus episode. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, if you want to check out the podcast, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can find our socials at the Stardomcast. Don't forget to check out the website, www.thestardomcast.com. And if you want to talk to me, again, I don't know why you would, but if you do, you can find me at @RealRobGoodwin on the Twitter. Before I throw to Matt, Awesome Kong, do you want to plug your socials and where you're going to be and things like that?
Oh, my Instagram is Spinning Fist. My Twitter is Mean Queen K. And Facebook is Kia Stevens. So check it out. And my dog's Instagram is Fat Fats the Dog.
There you go, guys. If you are not already subscribed to those Instagram accounts, what are you even doing? That, by the way, Spinning Backfist, greatest Instagram handle I've ever heard. Matt, sign us off, good sir.
Absolutely. You guys want to get a hold of me, questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. Matt Turner OF on the Instagram and or the Twitter is the best way to get a hold of me. If social media is not your thing and you want to send me an email, that's fine as well. The StardomCast22@gmail.com is the best way to get a hold of me via the email. Once again, Awesome Kong, we thank you very much for coming on. We had an absolute pleasure. We greatly appreciate it, and we always appreciate the support from the fantastic friends and family of the Stardomcast, because we cannot do this without you. Like I always say, it's just not my podcast. It's our podcast, because we're all in this together and everybody's different. Everybody's special.